Let's talk about COP29.
Welcome to Azerbaijan.
We must invest today to save tomorrow.
The planet is changing faster than we have expected.
Two-thirds of the world's nations cannot afford to cut emissions quickly. Then every nation pays a brutal price.
This isn't just another climate conference. It's where the world discusses big-ticket items like climate action and sustainability.
COP29 must tear down the walls of climate finance. Developing countries must not leave Baku empty-handed. A deal is a must.
Think of COP29 as the climate Olympics with the future of the planet on the line. Africa is warming up fast, facing extreme heat waves, floods and droughts, yet contributes only 4% of global emissions. It's a heavyweight climate match, and this time, Africa is fighting for climate justice. Will the world's biggest polluters finally pay up? Is this Africa's moment to turn the tables on climate injustice? And how will these global decisions impact the future of young Kenyans? Let's start with the basics. COP stands for Conference of the Parties, a global meeting where nations gather to address climate change under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It first took place in 1995 in Berlin, marking the world's commitment in tackling climate issues. Since then, these conferences have become annual events, each designated by a number based on its order. This year's meeting, COP29, represents the 29th time that world leaders, scientists and activists have come together to address the climate crisis. Every year, COP builds on prior promises, like the 2015 Paris Agreement, where countries pledge to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, aiming even lower at 1.5 degrees Celsius. Think of the Paris Agreement as a global get-fit plan to reduce emissions and cool the planet down. But in reality, emissions have only continued to rise, surpassing 36 billion tons of carbon dioxide in 2022. It's like making a New Year's resolution to get in shape, but not kicking the carbon junk food habit. That's where COP29 steps in. It's like hiring a tough fitness coach, pushing countries to aim for a 45% emissions drop by 2030 to stay on target. COP29 isn't just another summit, it's the financial intervention that Africa has been waiting for. With its low emissions but high vulnerability to climate impacts, Africa is at a crossroads, needing both support and action.
In 2009, developed countries committed to providing at least $100 billion per year to developing countries. And over the years, this amount of $100 billion has really proved to be quite insufficient.
According to the Kenya Country Climate and Development Report by the World Bank, Kenya alone will need approximately $62 billion by 2030 to cope with climate change effects. Extreme weather events already impact critical areas like water, agriculture and infrastructure, hitting everyday people hard.
In COP29, countries are meeting to agree on a new climate finance goal, which is actually referred to as a new collective quantified goal on climate finance.
At COP, the African group of negotiators represents the continent's interests. Made up of representatives from across Africa, the AGN pushes for climate justice. And Africa's message at COP29 this year is clear.
We are the victims, and the polluters are here. So we want the polluters to pay.
Developed countries built their economies on the back of fossil fuels and destroyed, our shared climate system. So they owe a climate debt to poorer countries for the losses and damages suffered. This debt must be repaid in the form of climate finance. This is the main issue.
Africa isn't asking for charity, it's seeking climate justice.
What climate justice entails is basically a requirement for these historic polluters to shoulder the burden. Africa is pushing to have about 1.3 trillion flow from rich countries every year to support its green energy transition and sustainable development.
One of the key strategies that Africa has employed here, even prior to this COP, is having a common Africa position on these key issues, and all those 54 Africa countries coming together to develop a common position.
COP29 holds the potential to be a game changer for Africa's green revolution. Imagine a future where climate funds support African farmers with resilient crops, communities with clean water systems, and cities with renewable energy grids. Kenya, one of Africa's strongest voices in this space, is pushing hard for an agreement that truly lifts up developing nations.
It's an injustice that a country and a continent that holds, I would say, more than 60% of the total global solar energy potential to be receiving less than 2% of the global investment in renewables. We're a leader on this front, but we also have a quarter of our population without electricity. The gross underinvestment in renewable energy is what continues to hurt our energy transition ambitions.
In the end, COP29 is more than just a high-stakes meeting.
Negotiating, the future of the planet isn't going to be easy, especially when we're talking about trillions that needs to be mobilized and provided to developing countries.
We don't expect short of a loss and damage fund that is actually fully operationalized, because as you know, in COP28, the loss and damage fund was established, and this fund actually hasn't been filled yet.
It could be the turning point that Africa needs. The decisions made here could determine whether African nations can finally build a sustainable, resilient future. But will global leaders rise to the challenge and make this the moment Africa's demands for climate justice are finally met?